I wanted to start this out with saying that this might be a little bit repetitive for some of you guys who watch all my videos, and I really appreciate you guys watching all of them. But there's going to be some different information in here. And I'm basically going to talk about 6-volt cars and one of the a few of the reasons why a lot of people converted them to 12 volts and what it's like driving one that's 6 volts and what to be aware of if you're gonna do that. I always try to convert my cars to 12 volt, and I'm gonna go over those reasons why. But I'm gonna talk to you about what it's like driving it. So first of all, when you build a 6-volt car, one of the things you need to be aware of is that your lights are really dim. And what it's like for the other drivers in the road, when they think you're a lot further away than you are, so they approach you, they might be approaching you at a high rate of speed and not notice you're there. So you need to be aware that you're invisible. And, the reason that is because basically, back in the 60s when this car wasn't that old, in the 70s, maybe even some of the 80s, they were still some 6-volt cars. People are programmed for what's around them. So if they're used to seeing something, then it becomes in your social awareness in your brain, and you know that it's out there. But when something is different than what you normally see, a lot of times people don't know how to react, and they don't know. It's not a normal reaction for them. So you have to be aware of what the people around you might be seeing. So, a lot of people think, well, there should be aware of everything around me. No, people just aren't. It's just the way it is. Okay. So you got to get past that and realize that you have to be the person who's proactive, and that what other people are seeing, they're not used to seeing, and you're not going to fix them. They're just going to run into you. So with these small taillights like this, they're already hard to see. When you have a 6-volt car and you're running the small taillights, even on the buses where you have the small taillight bus, let's look at one of those. So you have these small taillights on your bus. You're basically vulnerable when you have small taillights. You have 6 volts, so they're very dim already. You have really small taillights. People are not aware to be looking for that. They're just going to be driving on the road unaware, and their mind doesn't know how to program seeing something like this. They just do. People are in automatic mode when they're driving. So you have to be proactive. You have to be the one aware of what other people are doing, even when you're driving your car. So you're constantly looking in your mirror, you're constantly looking at all your surroundings when you're driving at night, and making sure people see you. The reason that I usually switch to 12 volts, if I can, on this car, is because it's a 36 horse motor. The generators for the 36 horse motor, being 12 volts, are really hard to find. And I actually had a working 6-volt one, and sometimes you could put a 12-volt regulator on them and they'll work. There's a whole video on just that subject, so look that one up. But you can do that, but you're going to have a limited amount of charging to your 12-volt system. So I just decided to keep this one original and go with the 6 volts because I was willing to deal with some of the issues. And if that's you, then you might want to keep watching this. So the other things that are a problem is your light for your speedometer is super, super dim. You usually can barely even see it. It's dimmer than the normal thing. Your headlights are much dimmer than the normal headlights. I found that having the fluted lenses actually gave me a little more light. I don't know why. Maybe it's the reflection off of them, but it seems like the headlights aren't that dim on this car. So, and I don't have LED headlights, so I don't know if I'm going to change those to LED or not. So some of the things you can do with your 6-volt car is you can go with LED stuff, and I have the voltage converters. I have videos on that subject, and the voltage converters, I basically run 12-volt lights on my turn signals and my brake lights and tail lights. So you can look up that subject, and you can find that on my channel. But that's one of the ways that I combat doing that. Also, I would recommend always trying to do additional lighting. I'm going to have these are lit up right here as running lights. I actually have little bullet lights that go on these here that I haven't got on here yet. There's accessories that are going in this car that aren't on it yet, so still working on it. It's a work in progress. Some of the other issues with being 6-volt is finding a battery. If your battery goes out, you know, you're not always able to find one, you know, because they don't always have them in stock, and that can be an issue. You know, jump starting your car, or, you know, something like that is always an issue, because other guys have 12-volt cars and you're trying to jump start it with a 12-volt car, and you could, you know, burn up your coil or your points, or your, you know, or all your dash bulbs in a real quick hurry when you're trying to run 6 volts. Also, getting a cell phone charger is always an issue, and it seems today, you know, like, people think that's not a real big deal, but, you know, if your cell phone's dead and you're on the road somewhere and you have a VW, you know, those are kind of a bad combination of things to have happen. So VWs, you know, break down because it's old, and, you know, you've got no cell phone because you didn't have a cell phone charger. You know, I found that this cell phone charger from eBay that looks like this one, the actual USB works okay. Even on running it with 6 volts, it charges my phone just fine. So you might find the same thing. So some of the other problems are, you know, you can't run a radio. You can't put a, you know, an updated radio in your car. On my classic cars, I don't run radios, so I wasn't worried about that particular issue. And that's why a lot of people update theirs to 12 volts. I run a Bluetooth speaker in my car. This is my universal Bluetooth speaker that I moved from one car to the next. So that solves that problem of having a radio, which is nice when you're on a long drive or something like that to a show. You really would like to have a radio. This is an option. You know, you can look at that also as another video on the channel. If you're new to the channel, this might help you out with that situation there. So some of the other problems with 6 volts are connection issues. You're going to be constantly fixing bad connections, because remember, you know, if you touch 2 battery terminals and they are 12 volts, you know, you're not going to get shocked. If it's 6 volts, you're not going to get shocked for, you know, pretty much. But if it's 100 volts, you're probably going to get shocked. You know what I mean? So the higher the voltage, the less the resistance, I believe it is. So when you have a 6-volt car, because it's a lot less than 12 volts, you have a lot of problems with your connections being bad. You know, like the fuses, you'll be constantly wiggling your fuses. You're going to be constantly, like when you go to start your car, it may not start. This one is kind of like, sometimes it starts, sometimes it doesn't. Let's just see if it does today. And I can show you what it actually started today. So, but a lot of times I'll turn the key and it just, there it goes, it just clicks. And then it starts. So, you know, and that's because there's connection issues. So it could be the connection at the turn signal, or at the switch here, which the old cars had the screw top connectors, which were actually better for 6 volts than the later models with the slip-on connectors. And I have a slip-on connector switch here, so it may be that, or it could be at the starter where the solenoid meets, it's not quite getting enough connection to bring enough amps to move the starter in, the starter drive out, and it's just clicking down there sometimes. So those are issues you're going to have. You have usually with 6 volts that you don't have with 12 volts. And it's just, so things like your headlight switch, you might pull it and then some of your lights don't work, and you got to walk around and beat the little light up, and stuff like that, and tap on your gauges, whatever, to get your lights to work, things like that. You might have, well, you don't have that with 12 volts. So, that's why a lot of people converted their cars back years ago to 12 volts, because of all those little issues. And and it was, as cars, over the years, as cars became 6 volt cars became a lot less popular, even in the 80s, the bright light issue was a major problem, because again, people were getting rear-ended because the guy wouldn't see that the lights are on even then. Well, now in today's world, it's like people are so freaking unaware of the drive. They are just so programmed with today's cars. They don't expect to see a car that's stopped in the road. They don't expect to see a car broke down. So they actually will rear end a car that's on the freeway because it stopped, because they didn't expect to see it, because it doesn't happen very much. But back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it happened a lot more often, because cars were less reliable than they are today. And you might not think that that's true, but it absolutely is. I mean, back then cars weren't, they broke down a lot more than they did today. I mean, I was a mechanic, believe me. I know even in the 80s, they become much more reliable because of computers and how the computers are engineering and make less engineering mistakes as the people do. So when they're using the assistance of computers and things like that, you can actually, today's cars are lasting, 10 to 20 years. Versus back then, if you had 100,000 miles on your odometer, in fact, they used to have a 100,000 kilometer award that they give out to VWs, because it made it 100,000 kilometers, which is only 60,000 miles. So it was, wow, he made it 100,000 kilometers, and big deal. Today that's like, oh my God, I think I just broke my car in. It's got 100,000 miles on it, which is 60,000 mile car is nothing. So, things are different now. Things are different, and that's why it's a good idea to update to 12 volts if you can. If you're, and that's why if you watch the video on the turn signals, making those 12 volts, that might help you out. It is a battle. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I've had the taillights apart like 30 times to get it right, and it's still not right. So, it's not fun, but, it is important, because you do not want to get rear-ended in your car. Especially in these old cars that had no safety, stuff. And the guy behind you, he's probably going to just walk away from his car. He'll go, oh, wow, I ran into a guy and killed him. Big deal. He walks away and you're dead. So, that's reality. So, anyway, just something to think about if you're going to go 6 volt or 12 volt. If you're going to trying to make the car original and you're trying to go back to 6 volts, and you can go 12 volt, maybe you should rethink that. And there's a reason why people converted to 12 volts, and that's why. So it's not just because it was cooler, or because they wanted a radio. It was mostly because safety. Anyway, I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.